Welcome back to Vuln Vibes. In this episode, we are going to talk about devolution vulnerability. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. All right, today we're doing a deep dive that honestly should probably be a P1 ticket on every CCOPS board by now. Our mission is to cut through the noise on a really high-stakes vulnerability in a foundational piece of privileged access management infrastructure Devolutions Server. We're going to be unpacking CVE 2025-13757, what it means for your security posture, and the urgent controls you need to be thinking about right now.
And what really stands out here and what should be raising all the red flags is the context. We're not talking about some, minor flaw in a niche feature. This is hitting the centralized vault.
The keeper of the keys.
Precisely. We're talking about Devolutions Server. This is where your remote connection configs, your most sensitive credentials, all that management access lives.
So if that vault is breached, it's pretty much game over.
It is. The CVE is 2025-13757, and it affects Devolutions Server versions up through 2025.2820 and 2025.3.8. And the real threat here is this convergence of a super high-value target, the PAM, with a distressingly classic vulnerability type.
Yeah, you see something like SQL Injection, and you almost assume it's been stamped out of mature software like this.
You do, and that assumption can be dangerous, as this incident clearly proves.
Okay, so let's break down the technical failure. We know it's SQL injection, but let's get into the formal classification and, more importantly, where this thing actually lives, because that tells us a lot.
The classification is rock solid. It's CVE-89, improper neutralization of special elements used in SQL command. You can just think of CVE-89 as the umbrella term for any time a database gets confused between what's user data and what's an actual command.
So it executes what it thinks is just data, but it's really malicious code.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part, the part that's surprising.
Where is this improper handling happening?
It's happening in the application's last usage logs feature.
The logging feature.
The logging feature, which is, typically an internal back-end function. It's for auditing, not some front-facing login form.
That feels like a major architectural blind spot.
It really does. Most development teams, they focus their hardening efforts on the obvious stuff, right? Login forms, the password vault itself.
So the theory is they just treated input to the log feature as safe because it was considered internal.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
It suggests that while the high visibility components are probably built with secure coding practices, this internal function was maybe overlooked. The mechanic is simple. The backend isn't neutralizing or isn't parameterizing user input before it gets stitched into a SQL query to pull up those logs.
It's that classic move fast and break things scenario, but it hits a component that nobody was really looking at. So when an attacker pulls this off, what's the end goal? What are they making the database do?
It's full database compromise. The SQL code they inject is executed with the permissions of the backend database user, which in a PAM context is often highly privileged. So they're not just trying to pull log entry 1, 2, or 3. They're trying to retrieve, modify, or even delete data across the entire schema.
So credentials, user permissions, configuration data.
Everything. Or they could just wipe the very logs they're using to get in. The target is the organization's secrets.
Which brings us to risk. We don't have an official CVSS score yet, but I think we can guess where it's heading.
Oh, absolutely. Teams should be treating this as high, if not critical, regardless of the score. Any successful compromise gives an attacker, complete control over the system that's designed to protect your most critical credentials. The severity is maximal by definition.
And the exploitability factor here just ramps up the threat. SQL injection isn't some complex, exotic attack. It's well understood, easily automated.
That's confirmed. But the most troubling part from the intel we've seen is the potential for unauthenticated exploitation.
Hold on. Unauthenticated? How does that work? If it's a logging feature, surely you need to be logged in to see the logs.
The sources say, in certain scenarios, which, could point to a misconfiguration, or maybe an API endpoint that accepts input before the full auth check is complete. And even if that unauthenticated vector is rare, the mere possibility means you have to act faster. And think about it, even if auth is required, the second a low-privilege user or a compromised internal machine gets network access to that server, the threat explodes. They don't need to be an admin to find this flaw.
Let's walk through the operational consequences here. This goes way beyond just a password reset. The whole security triad gets shattered.
It does. And if the triad falls, the business is in trouble. First, confidentiality. That's breached the moment they exfiltrate credentials. From there, the attacker has immediate lateral movement across your whole network. They don't need to break in again. They just use the keys you stored for them.
And what about integrity? That's about trusting the system itself.
Yeah, and that's completely compromised. If an attacker can change user roles, modify access policies, or worse, alter the audit logs to cover their tracks, your whole monitoring system is useless.
Yeah.
How can you trust an audit trail that's been manipulated at the database level? You can't.
Right, and then there's availability. Data theft is one thing, but just not being able to use the system is another.
And it can cause immediate operational paralysis. If an attacker deletes critical tables or just DOSes the database, your business grinds to a halt. You can't access your credentials, you can't manage your systems. It's a huge, costly interruption.
And beyond the technical disaster, there are the regulatory ones. You mentioned GDPR risk in Europe.
This is a massive compliance headache. Under GDPR, exfiltrating administrative data, especially if it contained credentials used to access personal data systems, well, that's a data breach you have to notify. The risk isn't just the cost to fix it, it's the fines, up to 4% of global annual turnover.
That is a huge stick. Which specific regions should be most worried, based on what we've seen?
The intel specifically calls out organizations in Germany, France, the UK, Netherlands, Sweden, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. That tells us Devolutions Server is heavily used in European critical infrastructure, and that the regulatory hammer is ready to fall right across that market. If you have EU citizen data and use this PAM, you are on high alert.
Okay, so the situation is not great. High-risk flaw, high-value target, major regulatory exposure, and the worst part, patches are not yet available. This means we have to pivot immediately to the defensive playbook.
Exactly. The vendor gap means you have to act now. And the first step, while obvious, is critical. Patch readiness. You need to be monitoring Devolution's official channels and have a plan to deploy that patch within hours of release, not days.
Okay, so that's step one. Until then, what about application-level controls? You mentioned hardening the inputs.
Yes. Your first line of defense is input hardening and validation. Since we know the flaw is in the last usage logs feature, your teams need to get in there and implement strict validation on all inputs that feed that function. Block everything. Single quotes, double dashes, semicolons, anything that could possibly be interpreted as code.
Let's get a bit more technical on the best practice here, because people use sanitization and parameterization almost interchangeably. What's the real difference?
That's a great point. Sanitization is basically damage control. You're trying to clean up messy input after you get it. It can work, but it can also be bypassed. Parameterization, using prepared statements, is structural prevention. It's the gold standard.
Because it keeps the command and the data totally separate.
Exactly. You predefine the SQL command structure, and the user input is sent to the database purely as data. It can't be executed as code because the database engine knows the difference at a fundamental level. Any custom scripts you have that talk to that database need to be using prepared statements. Yesterday.
So if the application code is the problem, the next defense has to be the network. How aggressively should teams be segmenting access to this thing?
As aggressively as possible. Immediately apply least privilege at the network layer. Restrict network access to the management interfaces to only the most trusted, necessary IPs. And really, we should be looking beyond just a basic VPN here.
You're thinking something like Zero Trust Network Access, ZTNA?
Absolutely. A traditional VPN grants you broad network access once you're on. ZTNA is much more granular. It enforces possession access based on user identity and device health. It means even if an attacker compromises an internal machine, they can't move laterally to the PAM server because that machine only has access to the one service it needs, not the whole subnet.
Which significantly shrinks that internal threat surface. Okay, so we've covered prevention. What about detection? What should threat hunters be looking for?
Your detection engineering needs to be laser-focused. Enable hyper-detailed logging on the application and the database. And then hunt for weird patterns. Database error messages, a sudden burst of queries to the logging tables, or queries with classic SQL artifacts like union select or sleep.
And since we know the attack is pretty standard, we should be testing our defenses.
Correct. Schedule immediate, targeted pen testing. And the test needs to focus specifically on this attack vector, hitting those internal auditing and logging functions, not just the front door.
One last thing. What about a WAF? Can a web application firewall actually help here?
It can. A WAF should definitely be considered. It provides a crucial layer of defense in depth. You can tune the WAF rules to detect and block known SQL injection patterns targeting those endpoints. It's basically a safety net that can buy you precious time until the official patch drops.
This has been a really critical deep dive. The main takeaway for you is this dangerous convergence. A classic CVE-89 flaw in a forgotten corner of a high-value PAM solution. The risk is extreme. You have to shift focus right now to these interim controls, parameterization, ZTNA, deep log monitoring, while you wait for that vendor fix.
And this whole incident, it really forces organizations to ask a bigger question about their threat modeling. The flaw was in a logging feature, right? A component often overlooked in pen tests. So the question for security leaders has to be, how much effort are we putting into testing the behind-the-scenes functions of our critical infrastructure? Are we just testing the front door, or are we checking the windows in the back office where we assume everything is safe?
A perfect thought to leave everyone with as they go update their playbooks. Make sure you share this with your peers in the security community. The faster this gets out, the safer we all are. We'll catch you on the next high priority briefing.